There is a place in Russia that was supposed to be untouchable. During the Second World War, Joseph Stalin made one of the most consequential strategic decisions in modern military history. As Nazi forces swept across Ukraine and Western Russia, he ordered the relocation of the entire Soviet arms industry. Factories, engineers, workers, entire production lines, deep into the Ural Mountains. Far from the front, far from the bombs, far from anything that could reach it. The Urals were Russia's safe harbor, the place where the machinery of war could run without fear. On May 7, 2026, a Ukrainian drone struck an oil refinery in Perm, a city sitting on the edge of those same Ural Mountains, 1,500 kilometers from the nearest Ukrainian territory. Stalin's safe harbor is safe no more. Welcome to Global Faultlines, where we go beyond the breaking news cycle to give you the strategic picture, the power shifts, and the data-driven analysis that helps you understand not just what is happening, but what it means for the world. Today we are inside one of the most significant weeks of the entire Ukraine-Russia war, a week that has exposed the full reach of Ukrainian strike capability, shattered the ceasefire illusion, and left Moscow scrambling to defend its most symbolically important event of the year. Let us get into the details. In the space of just 4 days, Ukraine conducted a series of long-range strikes that, taken together, tell a story about the transformation of this conflict. Let us start at the furthest point and work our way in. On May 7th, the Lukoil Permneft-Orgsyntez oil refinery in Perm was struck. That is 1,500 kilometers from the closest Ukrainian territory, the longest-range documented strike of this particular campaign. As I mentioned at the opening, Perm sits on the edge of the Ural Mountains, the industrial heartland that Stalin deliberately chose as Russia's protected rear during World War II. Ukraine is now routinely striking targets in a zone that the Soviet military doctrine considered strategically unreachable from the West. That is not a small detail. That is a fundamental shift in the geography of this war. 2 days earlier, on May 5th, President Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine's domestically produced F-5 Flamingo cruise missiles had struck the Vnir Progress military production facility in Cheboksary, the capital of Russia's Chuvash Republic. The Vnir Progress plant is not a generic factory. It manufactures Kometa-type antenna modules used directly in Shahed kamikaze drones, in Iskander-M ballistic missiles, in Kalibr cruise missiles, and in guided aerial bomb kits. It also supplies electrical equipment to Russia's Yasin-M class nuclear submarines. This was a precision strike against a facility that feeds directly into Russia's ability to wage war. Here is the detail that tells you everything about the capability now in Ukraine's hands. The straight-line distance between Ukrainian territory and Cheboksary is approximately 1,000 kilometers. But Zelensky confirmed that the Flamingo missiles flew over 1,500 kilometers to reach their target, 500 kilometers more than the direct route. That means Ukraine deliberately routed its missiles on a longer, indirect flight path specifically designed to avoid Russian air defense systems. The missiles were not just flying far, they were navigating around Russia's defenses and arriving from unexpected directions. Ukraine's Flamingo missile, produced by a private Ukrainian company called Firepoint, carries a warhead weighing approximately 1,150 kilograms. For reference, that is heavier than a standard NATO cruise missile warhead. As of March 2026, Firepoint was manufacturing 3 Flamingo missiles per day, and new, more powerful engines are in development. This is a domestically built, domestically funded weapon system, and it is reaching targets inside Russia that no one expected Ukraine to be able to touch. On the same day as the Perm strike, Ukrainian drones hit the Slavneft Yaroslav Nefteyorgsyntez refinery in Yaroslavl, approximately 700 kilometers from Ukrainian territory. Reports also confirm strikes on a paint factory in Rostov, around 100 kilometers from the border, and strikes in occupied Crimea targeting a bromine processing facility, bromine being a chemical used extensively in Russia's oil refining and manufacturing industries. A systematic dismantling of Russia's industrial and energy infrastructure conducted simultaneously across multiple regions and multiple distances. And then came Grozny. On the morning of May 8th, at least 2 large fixed-wing drones, identified by OSINT analysts as modified civilian aircraft converted into long-range strike systems, attacked the Chechen capital. One drone struck the Konkala district on the outskirts of Grozny, home to a major Russian military base in the headquarters of Russia's 42nd Guards Motor Rifle Division, part of the 58th Combined Arms Army of the Southern Military District. A second drone came down near Grozny's central railway station, approximately 120 meters from the regional headquarters of Russia's FSB, the Federal Security Service. The Chechen opposition movement NIYSO reported that the drones were specifically targeting the FSB office, and published video purportedly showing the strike on an FSB building in a nearby district. The Chechen authorities did not comment. Russian state media reported nothing. Chechen state news agencies, at the time of the strikes, were publishing stories about national construction projects and a report about a man who had a barbell fall on him in a gym. Meanwhile, 13 airports across Russia's South and North Caucasus region, including Grozny, Makhachkala, Vladikavkaz, Nalchik, Magas, Sochi, Krasnodar, Stavropol, Volgograd, and others, suspended flight operations due to the drone threat. 13 airports simultaneously shut down. The Air Navigation Services building in Rostov-on-Don was itself struck by a drone. This is what Zelensky, with deliberate irony, called Ukraine's long-range sanctions against Russia. Now let us talk about the ceasefire, because this week produced one of the most revealing diplomatic sequences of the entire war. Here's what happened. Following a phone call between Presidents Putin and Trump, both sides publicly claimed to have proposed a short-term ceasefire. The stated purpose of that ceasefire was to allow Russia's Victory Day parade on May 9th to proceed without the risk of Ukrainian drone strikes. Putin wanted a window of calm, a guarantee that his most important annual military showcase could go ahead safely. Zelensky's response was precise and deliberate. He said, in effect, if you genuinely want a ceasefire, let's start it on May 6th rather than waiting for the day of your parade. Let's see if this offer is real or if it is only convenient for you. Russia's answer was not a ceasefire. Russia launched a wave of drone and missile attacks that made May 6th the deadliest day of civilian casualties in recent weeks. According to verified reporting, 26 Ukrainian civilians were killed and 118 were injured on that single day. 12 of those killed were in Zaporizhia. 6 more died in Dnipro, 4 in Donetsk, 1 each in Sumy and in southern Ukraine. 1,200 Russian missiles and drones have been fired at Ukrainian targets in the course of this week alone. Russia then accused Ukraine of 1,300 ceasefire violations, referring to Ukraine's refusal to observe a unilateral ceasefire that Russia itself had just demonstrated it had no intention of honoring. This is not a diplomatic process. This is theater, and the audience is increasingly clear-eyed about it. The impact of all of this on Moscow's Victory Day parade, the most symbolically significant event on the Russian political calendar, has been extraordinary. For the first time since 2007, Russia's Victory Day parade on May 9th will feature no military hardware whatsoever. No tanks, no armored fighting vehicles, no nuclear-capable missile carriers, no junior military cadets. The Russian Defense Ministry attributed the decision to the current operational situation, a phrase that translates directly as, "We cannot safely move military equipment to Moscow for a parade when Ukraine might strike it." International journalists, many of whom had already received accreditation, were told they could no longer attend. The Russian state agency TASS claimed no accreditations had been revoked. CNN, which had been accredited, confirmed it was told directly by the Kremlin that it could no longer attend. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, advised foreign embassies and diplomatic missions to withdraw their staff from Kyiv ahead of what she described as inevitable retaliatory strikes. Mobile internet service is being completely cut off in Moscow on Parade Day, with serious disruptions already recorded across the Russian capital throughout this week. Zelensky stated publicly that what happens in Moscow on May 9th depends on the Ukrainian army. Think about what we are witnessing here. Russia, the country that spends more on its military than any nation in Europe, cannot safely stage its own military parade. It cannot put tanks in Red Square. It cannot invite international press. It is cutting off mobile internet in its own capital city out of fear of drone guidance. The country that launched what it called a 10-day special military operation has ended up defending its most important national holiday as if it were itself under siege. There is a dimension of this week's events that goes beyond Ukraine and Russia directly, and at Global Faultlines, it is our responsibility to surface it. According to a classified intelligence document cited by The Economist and confirmed in detail by Kyiv Post reporting, Russia was preparing to supply Iran with 5,000 advanced short-range drones equipped with fiber optic control systems, a technology that makes them resistant to electronic jamming and extremely difficult to detect. The plan, attributed to Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU, also included long-range drone variants guided by satellite technology and comprehensive training programs for Iranian personnel to operate these systems. The stated purpose: to enable Iran to target United States and allied forces in the Persian Gulf. This is the same Russia that has been receiving the diplomatic benefit of the doubt from the current American administration. The same Russia that Donald Trump said he would be able to bring to peace in 24 hours. The same Russia that Trump suggested might be softened toward peace if oil sanctions were relaxed. According to CNN and Western intelligence officials, Russia has already been providing Iran with specific drone tactical advice drawn directly from its experience attacking Ukraine, including the technique of sending coordinated waves of real and decoy drones to overwhelm and exhaust Western air defense systems. Those same tactics that Russia refined over 4 years of attacking Ukrainian cities are now being deployed against U.S. military assets in the Gulf. British Defense Secretary John Healey stated directly, "I think no one will be surprised to believe that Putin's hidden hand is behind some of the Iranian tactics, and potentially some of their capabilities as well." This is the geopolitical picture that most coverage of this week is missing entirely. Russia is not simply fighting Ukraine. It is actively working to extend military instability across multiple theaters simultaneously: Iran, the Gulf, Eastern Europe, while maintaining a diplomatic posture toward Washington that the evidence simply does not support. There are two other significant developments from this week worth analyzing. First, Ukrainian drones entered Latvian airspace. Latvia indicated the drones were likely Ukrainian in origin, having entered from Russian territory, suggesting the aircraft had been targeting sites inside Russia, were either jammed or spoofed, and crossed the border unintentionally. Latvia summoned Russian officials in protest, while maintaining that Ukraine has the right to self-defense. This is a reminder of the expanding geographic reach of this conflict and the real risk of incidents that draw NATO territory directly into its perimeter. Second, Ukraine's chief negotiator, former Defense Minister Rustam Umerov, is in Miami for the first direct face-to-face peace talks between Ukrainian and Russian negotiators in months. The context matters. The American war in Iran has consumed significant attention from the Trump administration, which had pledged to prioritize resolving Ukraine. The 24-hour peace promise has become a running measure of the distance between political declaration and geopolitical reality. Finally, let us address a question that everyone following this conflict should be asking. Where are Russia's air defenses, and how much longer can they hold? The honest answer is that they are stretched and being systematically degraded. Ukraine has escalated the volume and frequency of its long-range strikes deliberately, because doing so forces Russia to activate more of its radar systems more often. Every time a radar activates, it reveals its location. Ukraine has been making successful, documented strikes against Russian radar installations and air defense batteries specifically, not just the targets those systems are meant to protect. Russia is facing reported shortages of its Pantsir short-range air defense missiles. And as Ukraine continues to strike deeper and across a wider geographic area, Russia must spread its defenses over an increasingly vast territory with increasingly limited resources. This is the strategic logic that Ukraine has identified and is now exploiting systematically. Russia's great strength, its enormous geographic size, has become one of its greatest vulnerabilities. A vast territory requires vast offensive resources, and the military, already depleted by 4 years of attritional warfare, does not have those resources in unlimited supply. Sweden is currently in negotiations with Ukraine to finalize what would be Sweden's largest export deal in history, between 100 and 150 Gripen fighter jets, one of the most advanced NATO standard aircraft in production. The Gripen has a critical design advantage. It does not require conventional military airfields. It can take off and land from public roads and unprepared surfaces, allowing Ukrainian squadrons to disperse widely across the country and making them significantly harder to target on the ground. This will not change the war in a single moment, but it will contribute meaningfully and incrementally to Ukraine's ability to defend its airspace and expand its strike reach. Let us step back and see this week clearly. Ukraine struck an oil refinery in the Ural Mountains, the industrial heartland that Stalin chose as the USSR's protected rear in World War II. It struck the FSB headquarters in Chechnya. It struck military weapons production facilities over 1,000 kilometers inside Russian territory. It struck refineries, chemical plants, and military bases across a front stretching from Crimea to the edge of Siberia. Russia, in response, killed 26 Ukrainian civilians in a single day, and then shut down 13 of its own airports, removed tanks from its own parade, banned journalists from its own celebration, and cut off internet in its own capital city. One side is expanding its reach, the other is retreating behind its own walls. That asymmetry in capability, in confidence, and in strategic momentum is the most important thing happening in this war right now. And it is the kind of shift that does not reverse quickly once it takes hold. This is Global Faultlines. We track the forces shaping the world, not just the events, but the patterns beneath them. If today's analysis gave you a clearer picture of what is really happening in this conflict, share it, subscribe, and come back, because the fault lines are still moving.